Hello everybody and welcome back to the farm and welcome to a very special episode. There's two really exciting things happening here and one of them is pulling up on the road right now. I got a gigantic new tool. This is a late 80s Ford 755A industrial loader backhoe. This is something that I should have got a long time ago. And I didn't. I ended up getting smaller equipment, things that didn't work quite as well, but it was finally time to do this. So, as impressive as the actual vehicle is, this flatbed truck is equally impressive. This is a time lapse of about 45 seconds of this unloading the backhoe. But this vehicle can apparently carry up to 80,000 pounds, so I didn't have to hire a semi or anything. I just had to hire this company to transport it on a flatbed. Once it was unloaded, the rest of the process was very simple. We both jumped in, got the loader backhoe started, and then it was simply a matter of gently backing it down the ramp and trying not to hit the front loader bucket onto the deck of the transport truck. But all in all, everything went very smoothly. This vehicle, the loader backhoe, came from about an hour away. And as you know, I'm always scouring Facebook Marketplace for equipment that I need, and it's so hard to find stuff in central New York where I am. And this came up, I requested a couple of videos, I took the hour trip to go see it, and I bought it on the spot. The price was right, it was something I needed, and it was a horse farm vehicle. So for its entire life, it sat at a horse farm, and after they mucked out the stalls, they used this loader to put all of the muck into a pile, which eventually became compost. So it certainly hasn't had a hard life, and it only had about 4,000 hours on it. So all in all, for a late 80s vehicle, I can't complain. There's some deficiencies, there's some rust on it, and the usual stuff that comes with age. But if we take a closer look, it runs, drives, operates, there's no hydraulic leaks, and everything just looks good. So I think this will be a nice addition to the farm. Throughout the past decade, I've had many experiences in my life where I was put into a situation that never in my life did I ever think I would have the opportunity to participate in. And this is just another one of those opportunities. Never in my life did I think I would own a full-size industrial loader backhoe. Nor did I think I would own a farm or any of the other equipment that I own. But taking this for its first drive on my farm and actually trying to do something with it, to learn the controls and to figure out how to operate it, these are the moments that are really exciting for me. Every opportunity at the farm, everything I get to do is a learning experience and is new and exciting. But there are things that jump out in my mind, like owning the gigantic bulldozer, learning how to operate it, working on it, clearing the field. And now this. This is another one of those moments. And while I'm not really good at operating this thing yet, because let's face it, I've never in my life operated one of these, learning how to do this and experimenting and playing, this is part of the process that I really enjoy. So right here, all I wanted to do was extend that backhoe and tip it down right at the very foundation of the garage and see if I could use the backhoe to gently just scrape away some of these weeds. That was all I wanted to do here. So I got it lined up, and what I didn't realize is that when I curled the bucket, it was going to dig up a gigantic hole out of my driveway. So not only did I scoop up the weeds, but I scooped up about 200 pounds of dirt. So that's okay. I don't mind. It's a learning process. All I had to do was dump the dirt and then, wiggle around the bucket a little bit and try and smooth things out. So it worked, and that was my maiden voyage in my new Ford 755A industrial backhoe loader. I loved it. It was great. So the next thing I wanted to do was to spin it around, and I wanted to test the scraping ability of the front loader bucket. So maybe the backhoe was a little bit aggressive to try and scrape down some weeds, especially for my first attempt. But I figured the bucket would be an easier thing to experiment with, since I have loader buckets on all of my other farm vehicles. So all I did was lift up all the hydraulic feet and spin it around, and I very delicately moved the front of this loader into position. So right here I realized something very important. It's hard to see how close you are with this particular bucket. The bucket is very big, so it obstructs a little bit of the view in front of it. So I didn't really know how close I was to the building, and I was still pretty far away. But since this was my first test, I didn't want to go crashing into my garage and causing massive amounts of damage. I'll learn to gauge how close I am to things as I use this. But all in all, I dropped the bucket and I gave it a little bit of down pressure and reversed it, and this bucket can scrape the ground backwards beautifully. It made the ground like glassy smooth, and it scraped all the weeds away. So that was really all I wanted to do for my first time driving this. I wanted to play with the backhoe a little bit, test it out, and then play with the front loader a little bit and test it out. And right here, I'm backing it into position and turning it off quite literally for the entire season. I never started it back up from this point in late October all the way through when I finally get to uncover it in the spring of the year. It does need a new battery. The battery's very weak, so I know when I go to start it, it will not start. So I'm going to have to replace the battery in the spring. So that was the arrival of my new loader backhoe. I think it was a success all around, and it was delivered, finished, and parked before it got dark. I just wanted to give you a quick walk around, a slightly closer view of this. So as I said, there's some rust on it and a couple deficiencies here and there, but overall it's a really nice vehicle. All of the hydraulics have been replaced. There's no hydraulic leaks. All of the metal in all of the important areas are fine. There's just surface rust on it. The passenger side front window does have a crack in it, but I mean, honestly, that's not a big deal to me. It's a nice vehicle. Jumping inside, likewise, you can see that there's some surface rust on stuff, but the floor is all intact. There's no holes through anything. All the controls are good. And yeah, it needs a cleaning, but all of the main parts of it work. All of the gauges work. And then overhead, there is an additional set of controls for things like a heater and lights and all of the usual things that you would find inside one of these. I can't tell you if they work or not, but they're here, and it's something that I get to experiment with in the spring. Overall, I'm very satisfied. Another thing that this vehicle came with that I love to get when I purchase equipment like this is a full manual. While it's not the biggest manual, and while there's other supplemental resources online, it did come with all of the original materials that it came with when purchased. And this is a fairly comprehensive document. There's service guides, and there's even operation instructions in here. So I was very happy to receive this. Now as we look around the back lot of the farm here, it's actually starting to look like a farm. There's equipment, there's tractors, there's implements. I've got a small loader backhoe, a big loader backhoe. I've got the roller that I purchased, and I've got my little tractor, and I've got trailers. There's a whole bunch of stuff back here. So before I called it quits for the season, despite it being very cold outside, I wanted to use my new roller here and take a couple quick passes on my entry driveway. The entry driveway has always been very rough. It's always been kind of rocky and uneven, so I figured with 1 ton of vibratory rolling force, maybe I could get the driveway a little bit flattened out for the end of the season. So it had rained a little bit the day before and the ground was slightly wet, and I figured this was a good time to take a few passes. So not a real exciting process when you're on one of these things. You just kind of go back and forth. But despite it not being exciting, it's a fun process. And the really cool thing is, with every pass that you take, you can see immediately the end results. You can see how flat it makes the ground. It's really cool. So likewise, if you've never used one of these things, I wanted to take a few fun shots of it in operation. And pay attention to the ground too as I go over the various parts here. It really does make this ground, especially when it's wet, smooth like glass. And that's really cool. That's the intent of having one of these things. So this driveway will not always be dirt. My intent is to put down some fabric, geotextile, something, and turn it into stone, or maybe eventually have it paved. But until that point, I want to keep it as proper as I can, looking like a driveway. And the hallmark of a good driveway is being flat and smooth and defined. And boy, does this do a nice job. So this is where the season officially ends. And it ends by covering up some of this stuff. Now, I don't really have to cover any of it, and I certainly don't have to cover any of it end to end, but there are certain things on each of these implements and vehicles that I have here that I want to cover. So for example, this small trailer, I want to cover up the winch and the battery box and the solar panel and all that stuff. So I bought a bunch of tarps from Harbor Freight, and I bought a bunch of bungee straps from Harbor Freight, and I spent about an hour going vehicle to vehicle and covering as best I could the parts that were sensitive or open or had electronics or lights or winches or any of the stuff that I just didn't want to be exposed to the winter. And that's it. That's where we wrap up. But there is one more thing I want to show you. I received a 2002 Jayco Eagle Summit pop-up camper. This was a coworker's, and they simply wanted to get rid of it. They hadn't used it in years, they weren't sure of the condition, and they were literally discarding it. Has anybody had one of these, or does anybody have one? I've never owned a camper or a pop-up or anything like this, so I don't know anything about it. But they dropped it off here, and this is where it stayed. So I figured one of two things. I could either use it as a camper out in the backwoods until I build a cabin, if I so desired, or worst comes to worst, I could strip it down and convert it into a flatbed trailer. So those are my two options. And now comes the second part of the importance of this video. This is the last video where we look back to the fall, and everything from this point on is going to be new content from this winter. So, needless to say, stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff to come. We have a lot to do before the spring, and all of the coming video is going to be covering that stuff. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.